Good morning. Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Congregation in White Plains. We gather in the light of the Four Truths. It is a blessing you were born. It matters what you do. Your experience of the divine is true. And an important reminder, you don't have to go it alone. So thank you for those of you here in the sanctuary coming out on this weather-related morning. I have no snow by my house by the water in Rye, so I was kind of surprised getting here. But anyway, welcome, and for those of you online, thank you for joining us. If you're visiting for the first time online this morning, please take a moment to click the link in the chat and fill out the visitor form to let us know how you'd like to be connected with us. If you're new and visiting in person, we invite you to stop by the welcome table and say hello. Later in the service, we will share the joys and sorrows of our individual lives. For those here in person, please take a moment to add your words to the book by the south windows. For those on Zoom, please type it into the chat.
Our opening words this morning are by the Reverend Hope Johnson. We are one, a diverse group of profoundly kindred spirits here not by coincidence, but because we choose to journey together on our spiritual path of Unitarian Universalism. We are active, proactive, we care deeply, we live our love as best we can. We are one, working, eating, laughing, playing, singing, sharing, rejoicing, storytelling, getting to know one another, taking risks, opening up, questioning, seeking, searching, trying to understand, struggling, making our mistakes, paying attention, asking our questions, listening, living our answers, learning to love our neighbors, learning to love ourselves, apologizing with humility, forgiving with humility, and being forgiven through grace, creating the beloved community. Together, we are one, and together, let us worship.
Our chalice lighting words this morning are by Erica Hewitt. They're at the core of our communal faith. I invite you all to join me in saying them. They're in the order of service, and they'll be on the slide. To be a universalist means we'll never be done with the work of telling the truth about oppression, the work of resisting any laws, policies, or practices that deny anyone their humanity, the work of stubbornly seeking out the spark of the divine in each other, no matter what, the work of creating heaven on earth. To be a Unitarian Universalist also means we're not alone in our work. We are not alone because of promises to love one another. We are not alone because we're companions on the journey. We grow ourselves into allies, helping one another get free, because none of us is truly free until we are all free.
Our opening hymn this morning is When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. It's number 1008 if you have a teal hymnal. Those of you who are joining us online, good morning and hello. You can find the lyrics to the songs we are singing in our online order of service. It was in the email that went out this week with the service reminder, and also on our website, CUUCWP.org. Is that right, Tracy? Two U's. Used to be one. It redirects. Either way, you'll get there. So please rise in body or spirit, for our hearts are in a holy place. our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace when our heart is in a holy place. When we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the good of the heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place. Thank you. Please have a seat.
Good morning from Poughkeepsie, where we have a foot of snow and it is still snowing. So I'm delighted to be able to join you online this morning. This morning we'll hear Frederick by Leo Leone. This story reminds us that we each have unique gifts to share, which sometimes aren't immediately apparent. Being open to those gifts and perspectives can benefit a community in rich ways. This is Frederick by Leo Leone. Along the meadow where the cows graze and the horses ran, there was an old stone wall. In that wall, not far from the barn and granary, a chatty family of field mice had their home. But the farmers had moved away, the barn was abandoned, and the granary stood empty. And since winter was not far off, the little mice began to gather corn and nuts and wheat and straw. They worked all day and all night, all except Frederick. Frederick, why don't you work? They asked. I do work, said Frederick. I gather sun rays for the cold, dark winter days. And when they saw Frederick sitting there, staring at the meadow, they said, and now, Frederick? I gather colors, answered Frederick simply, for winter is gray and white. And once Frederick seemed half asleep. Are you dreaming, Frederick? They asked reproachfully. But Frederick said, oh no, I'm gathering words, for the winter days are long and many, and we will run out of things to say. The winter days came, and with the first snow fell the 5 little field mice took their hideout in the stones. In the beginning, there was lots to eat, and the mice told stories of foolish foxes and silly cats. They were a happy family. But little by little, they had nibbled up most of the nuts and berries. The straw was gone, and the corn was only a memory. It was cold in the wall, and no one felt like chatting. They remembered what Frederick had said about sun rays and colors and words, What about your supplies, Frederick? They asked. Close your eyes, said Frederick, as he climbed on a big stone. Now, I send you rays of the sun. Do you feel how their golden glow? And as Frederick spoke of the sun, the 4 little mice began to feel warmer. Was it Frederick's voice? Was it magic? And how about the colors, Frederick? They asked anxiously. Close your eyes again, Frederick said. And when he told them of the blue periwinkles, the red poppies and the yellow wheat, and the green leaves of the berry bush, they saw the colors as clearly as if they were painted in their minds. And the words, Frederick? Frederick cleared his throat, waited a moment, and then, as if from a stage, he said, who scatters the snowflakes? Who melts the ice? Who spoils the weather? Who makes it nice? Who grows the 4-leaf clovers in June? Who dims the daylight? Who lights the moon? 4 little field mice who live in the sky. 4 little field mice like you and I. One is the spring mouse who turns on the showers. Then comes the summer, who paints in the flowers. The fall mouse is next with walnuts and wheat. And winter is last with little cold feet. Aren't we lucky the seasons are 4? Think of a year with 1 less or 1 more. When Frederick had finished, they all applauded. But Frederick, they said, you are a poet. Frederick blushed, took a bow, and shyly said, I know it.
The care that Frederick shares with his own community is much like the care we share in this community, celebrating and mourning together, being present with one another. Let us breathe together and pray. Spirit of life and love, be with us today and always, not just the us who attends this service, but the us of all human communities and the us of all beings on this life-giving planet. Or is it too strange to ask the thing which must already be true, for you are, we are life, that which generates, that which decays, that which gives and takes away, and does it again and again and again. So perhaps my prayer should begin again. Spirit of life and love, ground of all that is, may we settle into our connection with you. May we know you and take you as real, for the lives we are conformed into require of us that we deny you, contort you, dismiss you, ignore you. The drumbeat of war is in the lands, bringing fear and violence. Conflict is among people, even those who otherwise work in shared purpose. There is exhaustion, there is despair, there is deep loneliness, there is shame, there is betrayal. There are sorrows inescapable in this mortal life. It brings us to our knees. Also, there is joy. There is the companionship of furry and feathered creatures. There are sunsets, the colors of which break open our hearts. There is poetry, there is music, there is art. There are moments when we are saved by each other, moments large and small. And truly, there are moments when we know we are home. There are moments, fleeting though they may be, when we catch the smallest glimpse of the holy. So let us now spend the next few moments together, breathing together, connecting together in shared stillness. Amen.
Well, good morning to all you hardy souls that trudged through the slush and the snow to get here this morning. My name is Jeff Tomlinson. I'm from the Racial Justice Team, and I wanted to speak to the Share the Plate Fund this month. This month, we share a half of our non-pledged collection with the Westchester Community College Foundation Student Emergency Fund. The fund provides aid to students at risk of dropping out due to financial emergencies in order to enable them to cover central expenses like food, transportation, rent, utilities, and medical bills that may come up suddenly that they can't cover. These kind of sudden emergencies often lead to students dropping out of college and sometimes never returning to complete their education. Our contributions to this fund can truly make a difference in the lives of vulnerable students, and through them, help us change our world one person at a time through the gift of education. So thank you for your contributions.
Wow. Not sure I can speak. This morning I'm sharing a reading with you by Janice Marie Johnson called We Covenant. Covenants are intentional. Covenants are audacious. Covenants are a promise that can change our lives together in this faith. Together, we will be stronger. Together, we will be wiser. Together, we will be gentler. We promise to recognize our uniqueness, to treasure our faith, to honor our neighbors with holiness. We covenant to be committed to each other, to consider each as significant, to consider each as valuable. We covenant to be invitational, to be accepting, to speak grace-filled truth, to forgive each other over and over again, and yes, to love. Our covenant stands firm. It is our embodiment of faith in each other. It is our blessing of each other. It is our commitment to each other. May we hold this community as a precious gift. May we hold our relationships as gifts that transcend borders. May we carry forth the intention of our covenant, the audacity of our covenant, the promise of our covenant now and in the years to come.
So who here has ever agreed to something with a pinky swear? Yeah, you know, Kim. Yeah. Pinky swear with me, yeah, right? So many of you know what I mean. Now, my most significant pinky swears were with a girl named Diane. Diane was my best friend from the moment her family moved nearby when I was 9 years old till the fading that often happens when people go to college and move away. She's the one who introduced me to the idea of pinky swears, a ritual to indicate our agreements with one another. At first, it was promises to ask each to play first before we asked anybody else. One, I think, had to do with Barbies. There was a lot of secret keeping and sharing clothes and other trappings of growing up as girls in the 1970s. And I don't remember most of what we promised over the years. But a conversation over games with friends this past New Year's Day reminded me of the great Journey album frequency agreement of 1979. The story actually starts in 1977 when the band Journey released their first hit single, Lovin', Touchin' and Squeezin'. And Diane fell madly in love with the song and the album and the band. Every time we played together, she played that album over and over again. Now, of course, I had my own albums on repeat too, but mine were often Broadway cast albums or John Denver or Barry Manilow. Diane's discovery of Journey was cool and grown up and all-encompassing. I suspect I'd hoped that her obsession would fade and we'd mix up the music again, but as Journey cranked out album after album, the soundtrack of her life and our friendship was Journey. Now, they're a fine band, some great songs, but I was getting really annoyed, and I was discovering so much other great music that I knew she'd like if she'd give me a chance to share. The Police, Blondie, Elvis Costello, right? But I felt ignored, and this had gone on for nearly 2 years. And then Cheap Trick released their album Live at Budokan. Remember that one? It was amazing. I immediately bought it, and I brought it over to Diane's house, and I insisted that we play it. And she balked at first. I can't listen to other music. I'm not being faithful to Journey. I think she actually said words like almost exactly like that. And then I explained that it felt like I didn't matter to her anymore. And we Pinkie swore about making sure to include each other, and this wasn't it. So I played it. And then we made a deal that we would alternate because she actually kind of liked it. Go figure. That we would play albums that we liked in turn. And yes, there could be repeats, but we had to be kind and patient as we shared our music with one another because we Pinkie swore about it. At the end of that conversation, that was maybe our very last official Pinkie swear. And those Pinkie swears were, in essence, our friendship's covenant. We made agreements and we ritualized affirming them. And we added or amended as time went on. Now, I don't know if boys had something similar. It seemed like a lot of things that girls did. But I wonder if you also had informal ways of ritualizing agreements. Yeah? Or did you just play? Hard to say. But I think we forgot along the way as adults that we already learned something about covenant when we were kids. And so when we encounter it here in Unitarian Universalist circles, it seems vaguely familiar, but mostly foreign. Excuse me, I'm adjusting. But because it's vaguely familiar, I think we forget to talk plainly about what we mean by covenant. And when we don't take that time, we just let the words swirl around us as part of the jargon we use here. Well, that's not terrible. Jargon, initialisms, acronyms, rituals, and even the stories we tell and the songs we sing are part of that cultural imaginary, meaning the things that help us define who we are and hold us in our identity. But sometimes we don't do a very good job of defining those things for newcomers. And newcomers want to fit in, so instead of asking, they figure they'll just figure out the jargon and meaning through assimilation. And eventually they'll understand what things mean if they hang around long enough. We don't often know what these things really mean or where they come from, and well, by now we've been here so long we're afraid to ask, right? So let's talk about what covenant is and where it comes from. Now, I joked with Rev Paul earlier this week that this sermon is essentially the history of covenant with Professor Kimberley Debus, so settle in. So the idea of covenant is as old as, well, at least some of the oldest writings in the Hebrew scriptures, beginning with Noah. Now, the God that Noah is talking to is angry with humanity, and God wants to, well, essentially reformat the entire hard drive and hit the reset button on Earth. But God's got a soft spot for Noah, apparently, and tells him to gather his family and a bunch of animals in a big boat. And that went pretty well, I suppose, although there's some technical questions I have about birds and fish and keeping prey away from predators. but I digress. Anyway, so just like God said would happen, a huge flood comes, wipes out the entire earth except for Noah's family and the animals on the ark. And now you can imagine that Noah and his family are pretty freaked out, especially when this flood went on for what seems like forever. But then God shows up right on cue, like in a Broadway show. Don't cry for me, Noah's family. The truth is I never left you. All of my wild days, my mad existence, I kept my promise. Don't keep your distance, right? So God and Noah agree. Keep the people in line, no more floods. The first covenant, symbolized by a rainbow. And then there's Abraham, from whom God also demands fealty. So much so that after making Abraham the father of many nations, he exacts proof in the form of human sacrifice, namely his son Isaac, which gets a puzzling last-minute reprieve. Again, it's called a covenant, but it's more like quid pro quo. So fast forward a bit into the time of the Exodus. We have Moses, whom God taps to lead the Israelites out of slavery. And in exchange for keeping them safe, gives them a set of rules, 10 commandments that they must follow. And of course, like many humans do, they bristle against the rules. And as soon as Moses is out of sight, they break the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. This is the whole golden calf thing. By this time, Moses is on the mountain chatting with God again. God has seen the people melting down metals to fashion the idol. And God is angry, so angry that he threatens another flood and the ruin of humanity. But what's different in this moment is that Moses speaks truth to power and says, remember your covenant, how you swore to them by your own self. Do you want to be as bad as those who enslaved us? And as the text tells us, the Lord changed his mind about the disaster that he planned to bring on his people. So we learn something here in the early stories from Hebrew scripture, that a covenant is not just about rules and how those in power hold sway under them, but it's about how those in weaker positions can hold those in power accountable. Well, that's not all of it. Remember that about 1,000 years after the Egyptian exile, a man we call Jesus comes around and says, all those rules about beards and shellfish, those are important. What matters is that you treat each other right, seek forgiveness when you blow it. Remember what I taught you about caring for the sick and the poor, and maybe talk about me every now and then over a nice glass of Shiraz. It was a new covenant, one that's the model, more or less, for how we understand covenant today. I especially like the Shiraz. But Jesus understood, as we come to understand, that what covenant is not about is authority or demands. And we still see authority and demand show up in our history. You see, Unitarians and Universalists historically come out of a model called Congregationalism, which was born from the separatist movement in the 17th century in England. So these separatists were fairly strict and dour in their faith, and did not much like the idea of an overreaching and much more liberal authority in their religious affairs. They thought the king as head of the Church of England was as bad as the Pope in Rome, and maybe worse because the kings liked to party and marry multiple wives, and you get the point. Instead, they thought that the church should have autonomy over clergy, liturgy, building, music, and behaviors. To escape what they saw as tyranny, some of these separatists left England to find a place to practice their religion without interference. A small number of these separatists sailed to lands they perceived as unsettled and promptly created their own settlements, much to the dismay of the people already living there. But these pilgrims built their new shining city on a hill, as John Winthrop called it, and they developed eventually a covenant of sorts because they weren't just planting one village. They wound up building settlements throughout that part of Massachusetts. And so they wanted a covenant, a something to connect these congregations. They called it the Cambridge Platform, which was written in 1648. Now, we talk a fair bit about this model in Unitarian Universalism, which forwards the ideas of congregational autonomy, and as well as connection and accountability. And it is, in fact, the foundation of the way the Unitarian Universalist Association governs itself and how we, as UU congregations, govern ourselves and stay in relationship with other congregations. Part of the problem, though, is that the Cambridge Platform also includes some scary rules for who can and can't be members, and punishments for misbehavior, and a full chapter on the process of excommunication. In fact, this so-called covenant is also a set of rules enforced by law, not by conscience. So that's not it. So what is covenant to Unitarian, modern Unitarian Universalists? Perhaps the very simplest definition is that covenant is a way to be in relationship that relies on mutual understanding and agreement. Covenant is a process. As the Reverend Tom Owen Toll points out, it is both a noun and a verb. We don't just have a covenant, we covenant with one another. This implies that covenanting includes a blend of movement and substance, of action and context. And covenant is also about generosity. When we're in covenant, we give our time and our resources and our talents and our respectfulness. As Owen Toll writes, covenant points not only to who we are, but primarily to whose we are. Meaning we are responsible to one another and should be giving of ourselves to one another. And as Janice Marie Johnson writes, covenant is audacious in that it asks us to commit to one another in a culture that asks us instead to look out for number one. Covenanting requires a kind of trust that is countercultural, that we trust each other and agree to be deeply connected to one another. And in that way, covenant is both obligation and blessing. What a blessing to be connected. But when we enter into a shared journey where some of us will sometimes stumble and fall short, we continue to be bound together. Covenant asks us to be in right relationship with one another, which means we show each other mercy and grace when things go awry. We forgive, we offer help, we don't retaliate. Rather, we offer to help heal what is broken. Covenant requires us to negotiate and compromise even as the covenant remains in place. Now, sometimes parts of a covenant no longer work for everyone, and things need to be adjusted, and that's okay. This isn't a sign of the covenant's weakness, but rather its strength, that it can bend and not break. And remember how Diane and I had to negotiate the Great Journey album frequency agreement? That was our adjusting our covenant with one another because of new things. And adjusting is expected because covenants are living documents. We covenant. We don't write it down or forget the rules. And sometimes covenant needs to be re-examined after a crisis or after new people join and maybe bring new ideas, new ways of being, or when omissions reveal barriers to belonging and welcome, or when situations change and people grow. But ultimately, when we approach covenant with respect, with shared awe, with open-heartedness, covenanting together means we are greater than the sum of our parts and stronger together even when something goes awry. And yeah, we do fall short even when our covenant is strong. Because guess what? See, we're human. We're all human. We're all messy. It's really okay. But covenant is constantly calling us back together. It's that often unsung or unsaid line in the familiar Rumi poem, "Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving." The line, "Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, yet again come." Covenant calls us back to the table so we can work out our hurts and make amends and grow stronger together. Ultimately, covenant provides what the Reverend Kendall Gibbons calls a defense against the impulse of immediate feelings that challenge our best intentions. She writes, "It is necessary to be reminded from time to time of what you said you were going to do, what you really want, over and above the lure of momentary comfort. Covenant," she continues, "is our word for the solemn promises that counteract the randomness of a future in which anything and everything is possible. By committing us in advance to certain relationships and values, we do this because what we build with intention and even with difficulty is more satisfying in the long run than the pleasures, that we happen to encounter. We do it in time-consuming rituals, invoking powers that we scarcely know how to name, because we are seeking some way to give our lives the density and dignity and depth that we suspect with longing might yet be possible." That's something. So you are in a covenantal community, but you actually don't have a written covenant for the congregation. And so you are about to embark on a process of creating a congregational covenant led by Reverend Paul. And in that process, you will deepen your commitment to and the blessings of one another, saying yes to belonging, yes to acceptance, yes to forgiveness, yes to drawing our circles of love wider, saying yes to that which calls us together and will not let us go. And if your process calls for pinky swears, I say go for it. These agreements matter to our hearts, to our community, to our work in the world. So let us covenant with one another. Amen. And I invite you to join us in singing one of my favorite hymns, and maybe yours too, 318, "We Would Be One." Yes.
We would be
us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice, strive to make us free. Amen. You may be seated. So, in the words of Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker, let us covenant with one another to keep faith with the source of life, knowing that we are not our own, that earth made us. Let us covenant with one another and keep faith with the community of resistance. Never forget that life can be saved from that which threatens it by even small bands of people choosing to put into practice an alternative way of life. And let us covenant with one another to seek for an ever deepening awareness of that which springs up inwardly in us. Even when our hearts are broken by our own failure or the failure of others cutting into our lives, even when all we have done and can, even when we have done all we can and life is still broken, there is a universal love that has never broken faith with us, and never will. This is the ground of our hope and the reason we can be bold in seeking to fulfill the promise. As we extinguish our flame, we say, let us go in love, go in joy, and go in peace.
Well, thank you for being with us today. After worship, we invite you to join us in the fireside area for coffee and conversation, or snacks and socializing, or hors d'oeuvres and hanging out, or whatever other alliteration floats your boat. Parents and caregivers, we ask that you pick up your children from childcare first, and the rest of us pinky swear to play defense in front of the cookies. Today is the last day for our mitten tree and for our chancel display behind me. So any donations you have, please leave them over here for the mitten tree. And we're inviting folks, please take these with you. Otherwise, they're going to be composted, so they'll be taken care of no matter what. But if this will beautify your home or your yard, that would make us happy. Tomorrow, at 7 o'clock in the evening, Reverend Paul will lead an online discussion, a listening circle session, to continue our difficult conversations around the war in Gaza. Register to receive the Zoom link. Next Sunday after worship, we're going to ask you to stay to hear our 4 delegates as they share their experiences at the 2023 General Assembly of the UUA last June. And next Sunday, also at 4:30, we're going to gather for a family movie night/early afternoon here in the sanctuary. We're going to ask you to come get comfy, PJs, sleeping bags most welcome, and eat some popcorn while we watch a family-friendly movie. And looking ahead, we'll ask you to join us on Friday, January 19th at 7:30 p.m. for an in-person Vespers service up in the fireside area with Reverend Paul as we come together for prayers for peace in the Middle East. The Environmental Practices Group is looking for volunteers to help them deliver food scraps from CUUC events to nearby collection sites. And we support local youth this month by sponsoring a backpack drive. There's a table up in the lobby. Our collection of gently used children's clothing continues through Friday, January 19th, and you can bring those to the lobby as well. You can find out information about all this and so much more in this vibrant congregation in our newsletters and on our website. It's truly been a gift to be with you today. In a moment, we're going to enjoy a final offering from this morning's special guest musician, Wesley Miller. Please, let's. Bravo. And he'll be playing a piece by Czech composer Leos Janáček. Then we're going to ask you to spend a few minutes talking to someone you don't know, or find someone you do know and ask them what their favorite book, movie, or TV show was this year. And we look forward to the blessings of our mutual friendship. Thank you.